This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider this, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to UNO. There are so many things that these days it's a little difficult to discuss in public because you don't quite fit in with the masses on certain topics. Anything that suggests that you might not be patriotic or you may not be part of the aggregate Americans. But we're going to talk about a few of those things today. My guest is Timothy Butts. He's Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union Nebraska, or Nebraska Civil Liberties Union. Now, what is the official one? Does that change?
It's officially known as ACLU Nebraska.
All right. Well, now we want to at least start out officially. We might go downhill from there.
We've been called worse.
I'm sure you have, and that's the thing. In fact, I was at a Nebraskans for Peace rally covering that recently, and some of the demonstrators blamed, in the breath of why they were there, was that the American Civil Liberties Union and a couple of other groups had ruined our country.
Well,
didn't know you'd done that, did you? Or had people told you that?
Well, Jerry Falwell, immediately in the aftermath of September 11th, blamed the attacks on the decline in the country that was created by the ACLU, People for the American Way, and homosexual activists. That was his term.
Mm-hmm. I do recall that.
And we just refused to dignify his comments with any response because they were stupid, they were ridiculous, and we continue to believe that they're stupid and ridiculous. Ironically, we defend Reverend Falwell's right to say them. The government shouldn't interfere with anybody's exercise of free speech. So he can say what he wants to. Our record speaks for itself.
The exercise of freedoms is something that the American Civil Liberties Union has defended, and oftentimes surprises you what stand they would take. But it's all based on a pretty consistent pattern. One of the things that the organization has been critical of most recently is this new Anti-Terrorism Act and some things associated with the aftermath of September 11th. This was a pretty broad expansion of police powers, correct?
It was a major rewriting of our criminal justice laws. And generally when the government goes about rewriting laws and redefining how things are going to be done in the area of criminal justice, there's a long deliberative process. There are lots of hearings, there's lots of comments sought, there's lots of thought that goes into it. This was rushed through in a period of about 6 weeks.
Now, we understand why, the time frame, but maybe you don't understand why the breadth of it.
Well, we're concerned about the lack of thought that went into it. Even though time was of the essence, that doesn't excuse the violations of civil liberties that are going to occur as a result of this bill.
Okay,
we threw some basic principles out the window.
Okay, let's go through some of those, kind of a laundry list, and then maybe you can elaborate a little. What are, kind of there's no order to your concern, but the things that jumped out at civil libertarians right away are?
The first would be the removal of judicial oversight from the process of issuing warrants. When it comes to terrorism investigations and also some criminal investigations now, under the what's called the USA Patriot Act, U.S. attorneys no longer have to go in front of a federal judge and present evidence that there's a crime that has occurred or is about to occur. They simply have to stand in front of a judge and say that the government has determined that they need to have a wiretap or they need a warrant for a sneak and peek search of a residence simply because the government believes it needs it. No justification has to be offered. The old standard was probable cause. It's not a compelling standard. You don't have to prove to the judge absolutely that a crime has occurred, but just that there's enough evidence of some wrongdoing that the government has the right to invade privacy for a certain defined act, whether it's a search warrant or a wiretap. Those are out the window, and government attorneys will no longer have to show probable cause that a crime has occurred. They simply have to certify to the court that they want the warrant, they want the information, and the judge has no discretion in the matter. The judge is required to issue the warrant.
All right. Say an act of terrorism is about to occur, and time is indeed of the essence in these situations. Obviously, that could, in certain cases, help that situation, perhaps keep some tragedy from occurring. On the other hand, as I understand it, one of the fears is that it is so broad that it will could apply to non-terrorism things, all kinds of just suspected criminal activity, all the way down the line.
Yeah, we're very concerned that there was language written into the bill that allows it to be used for areas outside of terrorism. And this thing passed so quickly that we're still dissecting the law ourselves. Like every other organization that's based in New York City, our operations were disrupted for a long period of time after the World Trade Center attack. Our national office, we're taping this on November 1st, and the email still isn't operating properly. The phones still aren't operating properly. The quickness with which we had to react to things was certainly impacted, and we're still in the process of tearing this bill down and determining exactly the scope of damage that's being done to civil liberties. But the government, let me take that back. The Constitution says that the government has to respect certain rights, and if they want to violate those rights, they have to go in front of a judge and they have to get a warrant to enter your home, or a warrant to tap your phone, or to look at your email. And the reason for that is to protect society as a whole. Because if you give the government unfettered power to snoop where it wants to snoop, to poke into bank accounts, to read mail, to enter someone's home without any kind of cause, you start living in a totalitarian environment. Our country was founded on the idea that people are free, and they're supposed to enjoy certain benefits of that freedom, and one of those benefits is that the government stays out of their life when it comes to matters of their home, their environment, their immediate privacy.
Now, with regard to wiretaps, part of the concern, as I understand it, was a jurisdiction, not necessarily getting a warrant or getting permission to tap someone's phone. One of the things that was most touted by the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, was that technology has surpassed the ability to just hold on to kind of what law enforcement and criminal justice had before, i.e., somebody, they got a wiretap permission to tap the home phone of someone under certain circumstances, or whatever it was. Well, and that was primarily the phone the person used, or their business. Well, now we've got these cellular phones, we've got disposable cellular phones, our ability to cross jurisdictional lines and use that same phone. I mean, there is some lag in terms of just the practicality of a one number, one position wiretap.
Yes, there is, and law is always behind technology. It's not just in areas of communication, but also in the area of health rights and other areas. So the idea of a roaming wiretap was supposed to cut down on the U.S. attorneys having to go from, if a suspect goes from Los Angeles to Boston, they don't have to go
Omaha
to
to Council Bluffs.
or Omaha to Council Bluffs. They don't have to go to two different federal judges and get permission to conduct their wiretap. Again, our concern, at least in Nebraska, we're very concerned about this lack of probable cause standard, that without the government having to prove even the most minimal level of proof that there's some criminal activity going on, you have opened the door to everyone's phone being tapped, every cell conversation being sucked out of the sky. The FBI has for several years been operating a project called Carnivore, that
the
email program that sucks things out of cyberspace and puts them on an analyst's desk for reading based on what language is used in
A
the email.
keyword or
Right.
some phrase. Or,
You know, if someone sent an email that says, boy, Nebraska sure bombed Oklahoma last week, that email is going to land out on a desk in front of an analyst somewhere to be looked at to see if they're talking football or are they talking about
threat. Is it
Oklahoma
code?
City. Is it code? And we're concerned with the cell phones, with the email, that this new world of wiretapping and communications interception is going to remove a huge element of privacy. Recently, within our family, there was a series of email communications that were exchanged about some family problems, and some language was used in those emails that could very well be identified by the government as suspect language. Now all of a sudden, my family's private life is sitting in front of some FBI analysts being looked at to determine whether or not we're talking about children or are we talking about something else.
okay, let's talk about some of. Let's group some of these things in. Obviously, if they're in the past, I mean, I watched Law and Order. That doesn't mean it's necessarily realistic, but basically, policing and district attorneys would shop around for a judge.
Right.
And they'd usually be able to, if they could get a hold of the judge, most of the time they could get their
Right.
warrant. Now, maybe that's not realistic.
No, I think that there are judges that are very friendly to law enforcement and probably require a extremely low level of proof.
A little lesser standard. But
Right.
now, as you're saying it, in a number of kinds of situations, based on this Patriot Act, I love the name, it's really, it has to just go, they just have to find a judge, and the judge has to sign it?
The judge has to sign it.
So doesn't that take the judicial,
It
the
remo-
balancing act just totally out of,
It removes part of the balance of power that's a fundamental scheme for our government. The judiciary has the oversight power when it comes to the police, and that's to prevent the executive branch from exercising police power in a way that hurts the country. And without that balance, all of a sudden you have extra power being absorbed by the executive branch without anybody saying, hold it, stop what you're doing, reconsider this, you can't do it, there's no restraint.
okay, the bill
Now-
is passed. It's passed, it was gleefully signed by President Bush, and you know, these people believe that they are patriots passing a patriotic act, and perhaps it may actually save some lives. Meantime, ACLU is sitting on the sidelines waiting for opportunities in some people's minds to just screw everything up, to, you know, to get in there and hurt law enforcement and hurt everything. What is your analysis of what you're waiting on the sidelines to
Well,
do?
You know, I was talking to someone about this the other day, and he said, well, it's the ACLU's position that you'd rather see 100 terrorists go free than one wrong person detained.
We've seen paraphrased
And-
types of statement like
Right.
that many years about the ACLU.
And my response was, no, that we want the government to do its job and keep us safe, but we want them to do it in a way that's constitutionally sound. When it comes to all these wiretap warrant applications, you have to look back at the history of the FBI getting wiretap warrants. We've only found 3 instances where a federal judge has denied the FBI a wiretap warrant in a terrorism investigation.
Wait, excuse me. In how long a time period? A year?
This is since the creation of the last federal anti-terrorism legislation, which was about 5 years ago.
So you've only found 3
Right.
instances
So
where a judge had said, nope, no
what's-
way, no how.
What's going on in our country that when you have that few rejections of warrants, you have to justify this massive change in how power is structured in the country. The judiciary
And
branch
were any
has been...
lives lost that we know of because of
No.
this?
And I'd be willing to venture that John Ashcroft himself would tell you that if this USA Patriot Act had passed a year ago, they still couldn't have prevented what happened on September 11th. The government, exercising all of its power, unchecked by the judiciary from now on, still can't stop a small cell of people that are dedicated to conducting terrorist activities. We've tried this domestically, trying to smash up domestic terrorism rings. And what happens? We have Timothy McVeigh bombing a federal building in Oklahoma completely off the radar screen. Nobody knew it was coming. Nobody could have prevented it.
But you are going to be sitting out there looking. I mean, right now we're seeing people questioned and all kinds of things in near record numbers. And I mean, part of me says I'm feeling very good that these people are being kind of pulled in off the street or wherever they're from, and many of them are foreign origin, and they're at least being questioned. But some of them, as I understand, it goes even a step farther, is that we don't even know how many of these people are being detained, if they have their what rights they have.
We've heard differing estimates from immigration experts that there are between 600 and 800 people who are being detained by the government right now without access to attorneys, access to family. There's no way of knowing whether that estimate is true or not. The ACLU has filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the U.S. Department of Justice this week, trying to force disclosure at least of numbers of detainees, reasons for detention, cities they're being detained in.
So there could be some that were kind of snarfed up here in Nebraska and being detained at the INSF or somewhere else, and for unknown periods of time. Now, is this what you're saying? And no one may even know. It's possible that no one may know.
The USA Patriot Act was amended from its original indefinite detention provision to put in a requirement that there be a hearing within, I think it's 7 days of the date of detention.
Well, that's a good thing.
And that's a good thing, exactly. But there are also some mechanisms by which indefinite detention can occur for a foreign national. And we're going to be focusing on that. We're going to be focusing on whether or not there are people that are being denied the basic right to talk to an attorney. The last thing that this government should want is to violate someone's constitutional rights during one of these investigations and force a federal judge to throw out an indictment or a prosecution. The government has to be very careful that it doesn't do something stupid and jeopardize the true safety of the country. Let's say, for example, that...
But what you're saying is, I don't want to ruin that flow of thought, but I just want to go back. So it seems foreign nationals are held to a different standard.
Right.
And there's concern about if this standard is too broad, too undefined, too quiet.
Yeah, we've entered a brave new world with the immigration reform aspect of the USA Patriot Act. If I get arrested, if I leave this taping and the FBI decides they want to question me,
well, and you know, I can understand. You're kind of shady. So they snap you up outside the student center.
I still have my constitutional rights. I'm an American citizen. They can't throw me out of the country. They have to let me call my attorney. They have to give me access to counsel. People from other countries, non-citizens, don't have those same rights. And we're concerned that the government is going to abuse this process to clean house of anybody that they think might differ with the government on any point of politics. The Attorney General has been given the authority to declare organizations, terrorist organizations, both domestic and foreign. So a graduate student here at UNO who might support some environmental cause and give $20 to Greenpeace every year could be deported from the country if the Attorney General decides that he's going to place Greenpeace on that list of suspected terrorist organizations. And I'm not implying that Greenpeace is a terrorist organization, but there's
all
no
in a definition. It's
right.
All
There's no guidelines for the Attorney General to use in making that determination, so that if he wants to put Greenpeace on it, he has the unfettered ability to say Greenpeace or Nebraskans for Peace or whoever is a domestic, or the ACLU is an organization that sponsors terrorist activities or supports terrorist activities, and foreign nationals who support those aims, support those organizations, will be deported.
Well, as I understand, they've been able to seal in court, and I don't know if what this has to do with the Patriot Act, but seal information regarding, and I can understand an investigation and process if there's information that's
Right.
fluid. So is that in addition to these exceptions?
The INS for a while has been using secret evidence, and immigration advocates have been fighting against the use of secret evidence. The USA Patriot Act allows the continued use of secret evidence. And if you
But
can
couldn't
imagine
you
a
go- I mean,
world,
wouldn't a judge be willing to protect that, which is really,
it's not the judge you have to worry about, because the judge sees the evidence. It's the
so it's
defense
still
attorney.
again not up to the,
The defense attorney and the person charged with the crime are the ones that don't know what evidence is being used against
them. So how
So-
do you face your accuser?
Well, that's a basic premise of our judicial system, is that you have the right to know what you're charged with and the right to present evidence in your own defense.
So the
But if
charge
you're
him or
not,
let him go principle does not.
doesn't apply in these immigration cases. If you wanted to take Franz Kafka's worst nightmares and translate them into law, parts of them would be in this USA Patriot Act. The idea that anyone would be subject to some type of judicial process and face sanctions, including deportation, based on secret evidence is unreal. What is wrong with telling the person, hey, we think you belong to Al-Qaeda and that you've given information or you've given money to Al-Qaeda, and we want to deport you because of it?
You have a problem with keeping some parts of that confidential for a short period of time, like we don't want to name the name that you communicated with because this might tip somebody off. I mean,
Well,
are there
the way it's set up now is that the defense never learns what the secret evidence is. The secret evidence is presented to the judge and not to the defense, and the defense has no ability to know what kind of evidence
So
it
can't
needs
defend
to put up in order to
their client.
defend.
There's no way to
And,
defend it.
You know, it's standing the judicial process on its head.
What about the issue of, since we're sitting in a university and since you mentioned a college student that might be involved in some terroristic organization or deemed to be terroristic by some person, such as the Attorney General, this business of, and it made sense to me, of making sure that people that come in student visas are students.
Well,
Do you have a problem with that?
I don't know that we have a problem with that. I haven't personally read the section of the law that deals with all of that. The ACLU doesn't stand for the premise that, you know, people get to go out and break laws willy-nilly. If the law says you get a student visa and you therefore have to attend college for 14 or 16 hours a semester, then the government has the right to strip that visa away if you don't live up to the terms of the visa.
And there's a burden of proof to show that you're living up to the terms.
Right. And that's as it should be, and that's all in the open and above board, and there's due process
And
that
students know
respects-
that, or these people that hold these student visas know that up front.
Sure.
So
When they're given the visa, they agree to the terms of the visa, and the visa is you're going to go to school, and you're going to let us know where you live and where you're going to school, and that's fine and dandy. I don't have a problem with requiring people that are benefiting from the protections of the Constitution from living up to the terms of the visa that got them into the country.
what happens if the United States wants to deport somebody based on, well, maybe they thought they were involved in terrorism and found out they were doing something else illegal. They weren't in school on an educational visa, and they wanted to deport them and their country doesn't want them back.
Then the INS gets to detain them indefinitely. That was written into the USA Patriot Act. It's actually in direct contravention of a prior U.S. Supreme Court decision that says the government cannot detain people that are in that catch-22 situation. The government is supposed to let them go. But under the USA Patriot Act, such folks will be detained indefinitely in an INS facility. And again, you talk about Kafka and the weird things that he wrote about and the horrors that people get caught up in as the government presses
That's sort of like a new
its thumb on them.
variation of the Japanese camps. Like if we had a war we declared war against Japan, we rounded up a bunch of Japanese as we did, and we said, Hirohito, do you want these guys back? And he says, no, we don't want them back. We've got our hands full. We're busy. Whatever reason. Then we put them in compounds with fences around them.
War is never a good time for civil liberties. I mean, if you go back to the Civil War and look what Abraham Lincoln did with suspending the writ of habeas corpus and trying civilians and military
are there not
tribunals.
extenuating circumstances in war? And can there not be for short periods of time windows that said, then it's like, okay, everything's off. You know, we needed this window of opportunity to just kind of batten down the hatches in a few ways, make sure that things aren't out of control.
Well, there's a window on the USA Patriot Act.
There is a sunset.
There's a sunset provision for most of the act that will require Congress to revisit things in 4 years.
Well, that's 4 years.
But that's 4 years in which rights can be violated. And generally, when the government has violated rights during times of war, the courts have not reviewed that and made decisions on those government actions until after the war is over. It wasn't until after the Civil War that the Supreme Court said, no, the government can't suspend the writ of habeas corpus. It wasn't until after World War II that you saw the government move to reverse itself on the detention and incarceration of Japanese Americans.
Well, then, in a sense, this country has sort of said that we are willing to suspend our Constitution in some regards because there was no hue and cry, even right after a war.
Well, there has been a hue and cry about this USA Patriot Act, and the ACLU is one of approximately 125 or so organizations that formed a coalition to try and fight it. And those organizations didn't reflect one strain of political thought. You had groups such as Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum, which
She's pretty conservative.
the ACLU has fought with the Eagle Forum on issues of reproductive rights and the rights of women.
Well,
you had a gun owners.
Protection of rights makes for strange bedfellows.
Yes, it does. And you know, the fact that 120 plus organizations from different parts of the political spectrum were willing to stand up and say, hold it, Congress, go slow here, think about what you're doing, shows that there's not an ideological bent to this opposition.
Well, there is an end to our show. We had all kinds of other issues, so you'll have to come back.
Anytime.
But stay tuned on this one, because there's more to come, right?
Oh, this is not going away anytime soon, and you know, the ACLU is going to be across the country, not just in Nebraska. The ACLU is going to be watching things and probably doing what we think is right in order to preserve rights.
But saying goodbye for now, anyway.
Yes, saying goodbye for now.
Tim Butts, Executive Director of the ACLU Nebraska. Thanks for joining us. Time
My
flies.
pleasure.
Join us again next week on Consider This.
This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television.